Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. Today we have a great opportunity to talk with Ben Azadi, right? Ben runs a great website, Keto Camp, and he has been doing a ton of work over the last few years helping people reach metabolic health and really understanding the ins and outs of how diet affects us, how to use ancient pathways like fasting and ketogenic diets and stuff like this to really start optimizing health and getting control of where we're headed physically, right? And with that comes mental health and everything else. So I had a great conversation with him. We kind of get into a little bit of specifics around things, but we had a great time and I hope you enjoy it. Hey, Ben, man, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast, dude. Could you just introduce yourself to those who may not know who you are? I mean, I know who you are, bro. You've been blowing up lately. But for those who may not have caught you, could you just kind of give us a little bit of who you are, your background?
Yeah, Adam, grateful to be here with you, man. I love your work as well. So the feeling is mutual. Yeah, so who I am now is very different than who I was, where I used to be very unhealthy physically, mentally. I'm somebody who grew up following a standard American diet, and we know how processed and toxic the standard American diet is. That's why the acronym is very appropriate. SAD. It is a very sad diet. And you do the best you can with your current level of awareness. So I wasn't aware of how bad that food was for me growing up, and I was very unhealthy. I was obese as a kid, physically, but also mentally. I struggled with a lot of addictive behaviors to video games and drugs and alcohol. My environment was really toxic, and I really believe environment is the starting point for everything. So my environment was bad, which led to bad thoughts and beliefs and bad behaviors and bad results, etc. And this was my life for the first 24 years. It wasn't until I was 24 years old back in 2008 that I had a huge wake up call. And the wake up call for me was being 250 pounds at that time, 34% body fat, depressed, suicidal, going through a bad breakup, food addiction, video game addiction, inflamed, feeling back pain, knee pain, just overall body inflammation. Where to the point where if I would go to the shopping mall, to the mall here, Aventura Mall is what it's called, the one in Miami, I would walk around and I would be so inflamed that I would have to wear knee braces and back braces just to walk around. I was 24 years old dealing with this. I wanted to give up. I was exploring giving up on my life, and I didn't go through with it because I kept thinking about my mother, and thank God for that. So my mom prevented me from committing suicide. My mom didn't know I was going through that. It was really, God kind of delivering that message. What would your mom have to go through? And that was a thought that kept running through my mind. So I knew I had to figure things out. And for me, it started with, all right, I'm blaming everybody for my circumstances. I'm blaming my slow metabolism, and I'm putting that in quotation marks. I'm blaming my enabling family members. I'm blaming my bad genetics. My dad's overweight and obese. Of course, I'm overweight and I'm on a path to obesity and diabetes because of my bad genes. But when you take responsibility, like that goes away. And I think that word responsibility gets lost in a lot of people. To me, that word is your ability to respond to life. That is your responsibility. So my responsibility was poor, so I got poor results. But when I took ownership and I took responsibility for my life, then my results improved. And I remember reading a book from Dr. Wayne Dyer back then. Books changed my life back then until this day. And Dr. Wayne Dyer was an author that I still read to this day. But back then I was reading his work, and he said something in one of his books that was just like a light bulb moment for me that I'll share that I hope resonates with your audience and helps with their health and their mission. He said, if other people are the cause of your problem, you would have to hire a psychiatrist for the rest of the world in order for you to get better. And man, that made so much sense to me. That like penetrated me deep. It is true. And that's unrealistic. Like, I'm not going to hire a psychiatrist for the people I'm blaming because I'm blaming them for my problems. It's really me that's responsible. So I took responsibility and I started to move my body, eat real food. And I went through this incredible health transformation, Adam, where I lost 80 pounds in 9 months. I went from 250 pounds to 170 pounds. I went from 34% body fat to as low as 6% body fat. Completely transformed my physical health, and it also transformed my mental health. Yeah, physical six pack is cool, but mental six pack is even better, and that's something that I achieved back then, and that was 16 years ago. So fast forward, I've been a student and a teacher. I've written 4 books. I'm writing a new book that's going to come out in June of 2025. And I focus on metabolic health. And we use ancient healing strategies like ketosis and fasting. And we detach dogma from all of that and deliver the science and the art of these applications. And the mission is to educate and to inspire 1 billion people. That's the lifetime mission. And the 10-year mission is to actually reverse type 2 diabetes in 1 million people. And it lights me up to have conversations like this because it helps us get closer to that goal.
Bro, thank you for that. Like seriously, there's a lot to unpack there, right? 24 years old, 250 pounds. You're considering some pretty permanent changes, to your destination in life, right? How did you go about, what was like your first step, right? Like, I think that's, like there's a saying, like the heaviest weight in the gym is the front door, right? It's like
Yeah.
that first step, that commitment. What was it for you? Like, what was the first step?
The first step was reading books and changing my mindset. The first book I actually read, I remember it to this day, is a book called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. And that book taught me about the compound effect. I think most people understand the compound effect as it relates to money. You save money in a bank, it has a certain percentage, it compounds over time. But there's also the compound effect with your habits, your habitual nature. So the book helped the book The Slight Edge helped me understand that the results I've gotten to that point, the poor results, the unhealthiness and the unhappiness, and I was broken, didn't happen overnight. It was a result of small behavior or behaviors every day that compounded over time. So I figured, all right, if that was the case, then I could change my behaviors, 1 tweak a week sort of thing, 1 change, 2 changes a week, and then I could compound it in a positive direction. So that first step for me was the mindset part and understanding that small tweaks lead to giant peaks. In other words, small keys could open up big doors. So the small steps and gaining momentum and then building on that momentum, that's what changed everything for me. And that's the same philosophy that I teach to my students now, because we could feel so overwhelmed with all these different tools and misinformation and conflicting info out there. But when you focus on just a couple of changes once a week, a tweak a week sort of thing, and build momentum, then you could stack those behaviors and different behavior changes, and then you could really make a lasting impact. So that was what I did back then. That book, The Slight Edge, helped me understand that.
Dude, that's awesome. I haven't read The Slight Edge. I probably will read it now or listen to the audio if they have it available.
Yeah.
But I like that I'm resonating with the whole small tweaks, little habits at a time, and then you're kind of habit stacking in a sense, right? You're slowly building over time. What was the first thing you changed? Like, what was the first tweak or habit you made? Was it just reading, or was there a physical change you made as well?
Reading was the first habit, and then moving my body, walking, and then exercising. And then the more I would move my body, the more energy I felt I had, and the better I felt. So then the discipline I developed with moving my body transferred into, okay, if I'm moving my body and then I'm eating like crap, it's kind of canceling each other out. So then I started cleaning up my nutrition and eating real food. And then those behaviors started to develop. And then it created like a snowball effect of habits and momentum. But the first step was the mindset part. I think that is the missing piece for a lot of people. It's 85-95% of our results will come from the mindset part. And then it was moving my body, changing my food, simple swaps, just eating real food, things that don't have a long list of ingredients, things that are on the outer aisle at the grocery store, things that don't even have a barcode, because it is what you see. Like avocado, there's no nutrition label because it's what you see. It's an avocado, right? So just following those sort of tips, easy little swaps in the beginning was what I started with.
Dude, I love that. Like everything you're saying is exactly what I teach people, right? It's
I
like
love it.
just small, first of all, it's small things. Secondly, if the mentality is not there, there's no point. You can go move around all you want. You're just going to end up quitting, or the first obstacle that comes along, it's going to be woe is me. There's going to be the pity parties or whatever, you know. What did you do so you lost 80 pounds in 9 months, you said?
Yes.
Dude, first of all, you don't look like you could hold 80 pounds right now, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like where, like where were you putting that? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you're super fit now. Um, it took, were you in those 9 months, did you have a lot of ups and downs? Did you have these setback moments? Did you like, how did you deal with that?
Yeah, it wasn't that fun. It really wasn't. When you start to change your behaviors and embark on worthy goals, it could suck. You work out, you're sore, that kind of sucks. You go to parties and your friends are used to you drinking beer and drinking alcohol and eating pizza and whatever, and you say no, and they make fun of you. It could suck. But I have a formula, Adam, for success that I think would work well for most people. And that formula is suck, 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 cess. You embrace the suck, lean into it. And I started to understand through books primarily that success is never a straight line. It's embark on the goal, you get a setback, and then you get back, right? Setback to get back. And it's really not about the setback. It is mostly about the get back. And a book that I read called U Square talked about rockets. And when the rocket launches to go to the moon or to go wherever it needs to go, that's their destination, that's their goal. But the whole time they're on their way to their goal, it's going off course. And then the GPS course corrects until they get to their final destination, right? Same thing with our success in life. It's launch, things happen, life punches you in the face, whatever happens, and then you course correct. So you essentially fail your way forward, and you just keep course correcting. So the books, I mean, the mindset was everything, because if I didn't have that mindset, the first time I'd have the setback, or maybe the second or third time, I don't know when, I would have given up. I would have said, this is a failure. This didn't work for me. So back to your point with the mindset, that is everything. And when you have a strong mindset, like, you become unstoppable, and you start to see failure not as failure, but as an opportunity, a stepping stone, something you learn from. And failure doesn't really exist as long as you don't quit. So the mindset helped me with all of that. There were setbacks. There were times where friends were making fun of me. There was times where I was progressing, and then I took a step back, but I never gave up. And Napoleon Hill used to say, "Quitters never win, winners never quit." And that stuck with me, and it still sticks with me to this day.
Yeah, I love that. It's you. I really think you're hitting on something super special there, in that there has to be this resolution, right? There has to be this I'm going to win no matter how long it takes kind of, mentality, and even redefining what the win is and what failure actually is, and setting yourself up for being able to continue for the long haul. There's a scripture in Ecclesiastes, the book of Ecclesiastes, where, everybody knows it. Like, there's a time to reap, there's a time to sow, there's a time for flesh. It never says there's a time to quit, or it never says there's a time to give up, right? So the one thing you can do is just keep pressing forward, right? And if you can do that, I feel like success is guaranteed in some
It
way.
is.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just a matter of time. It really
Exactly.
is.
And I love that,
Yeah.
because it just resonates super strong with me, because I tell people, like, look, I'm not good at this stuff. I just don't quit.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I'm too hard headed. I don't know how to quit.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing. That's definitely you're bound to win if you don't quit. If you never quit,
Exactly.
you're bound to win. It might not happen tomorrow, but eventually it will happen. You just get better. And a lot of people wish for the wrong thing. I wish it was easier. Why is this so hard? I wish it was easier, but we don't want it to be easier. We want to be better. We want to be stronger. We want to be more resilient. So don't wish for it to be easier. Work on you being better. And it starts with your mindset. That's the first step to great change, responsibility and mindset change.
Dude, I love that. It's super. That's like, that'll change somebody's life right there. How did you get into, like, obviously your podcast is Keto Camp. I mean, I don't know how many, you've done hundreds of podcasts. I mean, like, you've been crushing it. How did you get into just kind of the low carb keto lifestyle? And then you kind of got into a little bit of the biohacking somewhat. I mean, I don't know if that's the term you want to use. But how did you get in? How did you start going down that road, and especially the keto lifestyle?
Yeah, so when I lost the weight, I was fit and lean, but I was one of those fit, sick people. I still didn't feel that healthy. So I had digestive issues and brain fog and hormone issues. So I was still exploring what real cellular health felt like and looked like. So I would explore different dietary interventions like a paleo diet, a vegan diet. I did a vegan diet for a year and a half. It didn't work well. And 2013, when I was transitioning away from a vegan diet, I started to get into some of the research on a ketogenic diet, intermittent fasting, and it made a lot of sense to me that these are ancient tools that have been around forever. They're not new. Keto is not new. Fasting is not new. It's just nuanced or new to some people, but they've been around forever. And our ancestors practice all these modalities. So that's when I started to experiment with keto and fasting in 2013, 2014, and it made a big difference for me. I was dogmatic about it back then. Now I'm doing my best to detach the dogma. So back then I would have thought keto forever, keto, keto, keto. Now I'm not, I think keto is a tool, but it's not the only tool we go in and out. So that was what, 2013, 2014, that's 10, 11 years ago. It was before keto really took off and fasting really took off. It was during the days where I would test my blood ketones and it was like $7 a strip to test your blood ketones. And if you messed up on the number, like you lost $7. I remember doing that. But yeah, I've learned a lot along the way. I think keto is fantastic. Don't get me wrong, but it's one tool in the shed. And biohacking is great. I think a lot of people in the biohacking space are doing a lot of great things. I mean, biohack is essentially biohacking is getting a faster, to me, it means getting a faster result, like hacking your biology to get double the results in half the amount of time, right? And there's so many cool things that we could talk about in order to do that. But to answer your question, 2013, 2014 is when I got into keto and started implementing it. At this time, I used to own a CrossFit gym here in Miami, and I owned it back then. And I would do these workshops for the members of my gym on keto, on fasting, and man, it fell on deaf ears, bro. It was like they did not want to hear about cutting carbs, about skipping meals. They thought they were going to lose their gains, and I was like, I kept preaching it to them, and there wasn't a ton of science back then, so I had to share kind of anecdotal evidence. And eventually, I got through to them, but it was funny because right now, if I did the seminars, they would all get it. Everybody knows about keto and fasting, but back then, man, they were looking at me like, damn, this guy's crazy. So it's been cool to kind of see how it's all evolved, though.
Dude, CrossFit is hilarious with all that, right? At first it was like they were, it was they did the zone diet for years, and then all of a sudden they went paleo, and then they basically went keto.
Yeah.
In the long term, and they became super dogmatic about it. It was just, it's just funny how information cycles, like, it's just hilarious. I did CrossFit for years before it was ever cool. I got all the injuries before everybody else. You know what I mean? Like, I loved it, man. I loved every bit of it. We crushed it for years. And I think that changed my life, honestly. But I love that you mentioned it's a tool, right? Because I feel like one of the big things is we've got all these these diet wars going on, right? And I feel like many people are missing the big concept that, listen, these are tools, these are strategies. They're not religious. They're not written in any religious book anywhere that somebody's got to maintain this thing, right? I feel like I was talking to a guy the other day. I was like, dude, if you're reading the Bible to find a diet, you've missed the point of the Bible. You know what I'm saying? Like, you've just missed the whole point, right? So I'm wondering, what are you? There's my puppy, by the way.
It's beautiful. Yeah, I love him.
I'm over here like trying to get her to be quiet. But what do you see? What do you see some of the detriments of people getting into these real dogmatic approaches towards diet and lifestyle, right? What do you see? What are some of the drawbacks of that?
Keto, for example, when we think about how the metabolism works, we're not designed to stick with one energy source. So out of the 70 trillion cells in the body, there's two primary energy systems: your sugar burning / glucose burning system, and then your fat burning / ketone producing system. So either we're burning sugar or fat. In other words, you could say glucose or ketone. So those are the two primary sources of energy. If you're locked in any one and only in one system, that's a problem. 93% of adults in the United States, according to studies, are locked they're burning sugar and they forgot how to burn fat. And I call them, they're in a keto deficiency essentially. But then we have the people in the keto space, my space, who are very dogmatic, who are only burning fat and ketones and they forgot how to burn sugar. So that's another form of metabolic inflexibility. There's two forms, only burning sugar or only burning fat. Now, the majority of people are only burning sugar, but there is people in my space, the keto space, who are only burning fat. The problem with that, number one, is your metabolism should be flexible. And a lot of people talking about metabolism, metabolic health. And I don't think a lot of people really understand how the metabolism works. We hear people saying, I want to speed up the metabolism. My metabolism is too slow. But really, the metabolism is not working in speeds. It's either efficient or inefficient. And we don't really want to have a fast metabolism. I've studied animals in nature, Adam, and animals in nature that have a fast metabolism have a shorter lifespan. So it's not about the fast metabolism. It's about flexible, efficient metabolism. That's actually the topic of the book I'm writing that's coming out in 2025, which is going to be called tentatively Metabolic Freedom, which is a next level of metabolic flexibility. So to answer your question, if we become dogmatic, we close off other solutions, we close ourselves off to other things that could potentially help us, and it doesn't serve you. It really doesn't. It feels good to call yourself, like, I don't know, Keto Kevin or Carnivore Kathy or whatever it is, and put a moniker on it, and to have like, this is me, and you identify with it. I mean, it's cool to find a tribe like that, but when you identify with a diet or a dogma, in the long run, it's going to hurt you more than it's going to help you. And look, I say that with love. I say that with grace. I say that as somebody who's been very dogmatic, as a vegan, as a CrossFitter, as somebody who did keto. Like, I was very dogmatic, and I do my best to become aware of when I am dogmatic, and I'm open to other things. And we're all so different. Just because I could do really well with carnivore and meat and keto, and doesn't mean that somebody else could, right? So we have to find our unique approach that works for us. And I think how you feel, lab work, and things of that nature are good pieces to the puzzle to see if it's working for you or against you.
Dude, that's a great answer. Could you help, for those who are maybe uninitiated into this a little bit, explain a little more in depth metabolic flexibility? I think people think you just have a metabolism, right? And it just does what it does. And like everybody says, I need it to be faster or blah, blah. Mine's broken. Could you maybe just give us a little more nuance into what flexibility means in those terms?
Yes. So the Greek definition for metabolism is transform. So essentially, we take food that we eat and supplements that we take, and even sunlight and oxygen that we breathe, and even your thoughts, by the way, and we transform that, we change that into energy. And when somebody has a healthy metabolism, the way that God built the body to thrive, then we take these different, we'll call them substrates. So what I mean by substrates are fuel sources: food, supplements, thoughts, sunlight, oxygen. And we could metabolize, transform, change these substrates into energy, where the cells produce energy, the cells burn fat, and we feel good. This is the way God built us. When we have interference through inflammation and different factors, now that metabolism is not functioning the way that God designed it to function. So what happens is we're not able to use different substrates. So the flexibility part is the goal, meaning you could use different substrates. You could use sugar when you want to. You eat carbs, carbohydrates, and then it raises glucose and your cells use it, metabolize it, and nothing detrimental happens. And then when you want to burn fat, you eat fat or you fast and you don't eat anything and you burn body fat, burn dietary fat, and you produce ketones. Being able to go back and forth for your cells to burn sugar when it needs to and then burn fat and ketones, that's metabolic flexibility. Unfortunately, 93% of United States adults are metabolically inflexible. They're only burning sugar. And what we want to do, that I mentioned it, they're in a keto deficiency. So they really need to get into a fat burning mode, get into ketosis, and then go back and forth in and out of ketosis. So that is metabolic flexibility.
Dude, that's a great answer. I think, was it Mark Sisson who first kind of coined that term? Is that right?
Yeah, he's the OG, the godfather of metabolic flexibility.
Dude,
I actually have
I've been I was reading Mark's Daily Apple, bro, back in the
Yeah,
day.
he's a legend. I actually had the honor of interviewing him here in person a few months ago. It was amazing. He's here in Miami like me. He's a great
Oh
guy.
man, I'm like believing that I'll be able to get him on here one day.
Yeah,
Just because he's just a savage dude, and he's in
he's a
his
legend.
70s. He's a legend. He looks awesome. He's smart.
Yes.
He's freaking handsome. What the
Hmm.
heck? The dude's got everything, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He's
Kudos to
awesome.
him, man. Yeah. He's a
Awesome.
good guy.
So let me ask, when it comes to metabolic flexibility, how does someone go about creating metabolic flexibility? If 93% of us are predominantly burning carbohydrates that we've eaten because we tend to eat a significant portion of our calories from carbohydrates, how do I go about creating this flexibility if it's this thing that I need to have?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's one main hormone. There's one main hormone that blocks this flexibility when it's elevated in excess, and that hormone is called insulin. So, if we think about insulin and the foods that elicit the biggest insulin response, it gets us to the answer. We have three macronutrients: carbohydrates, fat, and then we have protein. In terms of which macronutrient elicits the biggest insulin response that locks you into sugar burning, that is carbohydrates. And of course, not all carbohydrates are created equal. You have whole foods carbs and vegetables and non-starchy carbs. Then you have processed carbs, but all will elicit an insulin response depending on how processed, higher insulin response. Then we have protein. Protein does elicit an insulin response, but it's a very minimal response. It's called a phase 2 response, so very low. And then fat. Fat does not touch the dial on insulin. You could eat 2 tablespoons of coconut oil or just straight up fat, no insulin is produced. So if that's the case, that means we want to eat more fat and protein and less carbs. Pretty simple, right? Because we want to lower insulin to then unlock the fat burning doors and become metabolically flexible and become a fat burner. So for most people, if they start to lower their total carbs to, let's say, 50 total grams of carbs per day for most people, and then increase healthy fat and protein, doing that little switch lowers insulin, lowers inflammation, lowers glucose, and then you're now fat adapted. And you could do that in 7 days. So you could do it in 10 days. And you could test and verify if you're fat adapted by looking at blood ketones. But that's the first step. And that is a very important step because high glucose and high insulin levels are the first domino to fall that leads to metabolic destruction, that leads to hyperinsulinemia, also called insulin resistance. That leads to type 2 diabetes. And from there on out, it's cancer, amputations, kidney failures, autoimmune diseases, PCOS. Like it's what the diabetes leads to. That's the problem. It's not necessarily the diabetes that's the issue. I shouldn't say nobody. It's rare to die from diabetes. They're dying from what's connected to the diabetes. But the first domino to fall is the high glucose and insulin. So the best lab marker that you can get for metabolism is a fasting insulin. It's a blood test. You could go through insurance. Sometimes they don't cover it, but if you pay out of pocket, it's like $30. Best test to know how healthy your metabolism is. You want your fasting insulin to be in the single digits. If it's in the teens, you have insulin resistance. If it's 20 plus, 30 plus, you got full-blown insulin resistance. And if that continues, then the blood sugars change, you're diagnosed with diabetes, and it leads to all the other problems I mentioned. So get a fasting insulin done. It's the first domino to fall when it's high. And then if you make that little switch, less carbs, more protein and fat, then it leads you down the right direction.
Yeah, I know. When I've been talking with a lot of folks about this, insulin resistance, and it's one of the, I mean, I feel like dealing with your insulin levels is probably the first real thing besides mindset in general. But if we're going to take a plan of attack to being metabolic, I feel like getting that under control is probably one of the first steps. Would you agree?
Yeah, that's the first domino. That's the first thing you want to take care of. Yep.
So with that, obviously we're going to get lots of questions, right? We're going to get lots of questions around, oh, fats and protein and, oh, my kidneys and, oh, what about heart disease? And right. So, and I know you recently I want to dive into this a little bit. You recently went on a carnivore diet, which I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about that. But what are your responses to people who are like, well, I'm afraid that I'm going to have a heart attack from this eating too much fat or whatever? How do you help educate people around that lipid issue?
It's a really important question. It's the most popular question I get on social media is about cholesterol, LDL, etc. There's a term called lipophobia, the fear of fat based off of 50 plus years of dietary dogma and misinformation. That's the definition, at least my definition of it. Um, it all stems from one guy, believe it or not. In the night, and I'll give a quick backstory so we could understand what happened. A gentleman named Ansel Keys back in the 1950s worked with the United States government because Eisenhower, the president Eisenhower, had a heart attack and it was becoming a problem. They wanted to determine what's causing these heart attacks. So Ansel Keys did a 22 country study where he looked at the countries that have the highest amount of heart disease. And he had a hypothesis that they're the same countries that have been consuming the highest amounts of cholesterol, saturated fats, etc. When he published his data, he called it the 7 country study. Didn't show the other countries because it didn't correlate to his hypothesis. But the 7 studies that he published, he said they're having high amounts, these countries had high amounts of heart disease, which correlated to their fat consumption and their saturated fat consumption. But what he didn't share is that they were actually consuming fake fat, trans fats, and margarine. They were not consuming saturated fat. So he lied. He cherry picked the data, hid the information. The government went along with it, put all these dietary guidelines in place. And that's where the low fat craze came into play. Now, fast forward now, we know the truth, but a lie repeated often enough becomes the truth. And for the general public, they still believe that cholesterol causes heart disease. And here's why. When they did autopsies on these heart attack victims, they would see all this cholesterol built up in the arteries. And that's where the conclusion came. Oh, it's the cholesterol that caused the heart attack. But that's like saying every time there's a fire in my neighborhood, in my city, I noticed there are firefighters there. Therefore, it's the firefighters that caused the fire because they're always at the scene of the crime. Well, the firefighters are there to put out the fire. The cholesterol is there to put out the fire too, the inflammation. It's the inflammation that causes the damage. The cholesterol is the Band-Aid. Cholesterol makes our sex hormones, helps our liver produce bile, which helps us detoxify and break down fat. Every cell in the body has a lipid layer around it, and it's made up of cholesterol. Like God didn't make mistakes, right? We were made up of fat. The brain and the body loves fat. But we're dealing with this lie that has been passed down year after year after year. And studies actually show, a 2009 study from Harvard showed that more people die from heart disease with normal to low cholesterol than high cholesterol. But when I looked at how much money the statin industry made last year, it was $13.4 billion. So do they want us to know the truth? No. And I interviewed Dr. Nathan Bryan, who's a nitric oxide researcher, and he's a friend of mine. And he made the case that if your total cholesterol is 200 or less, it blocks nitric oxide, increasing risk of heart disease and creating vasoconstriction of the arteries, right? So it's not what you think. If you're eating quality fats, fats that are not adulterated, not industrialized, the body knows what to do with it. Total cholesterol on your lab report is absolutely meaningless. Even total LDL is meaningless. You want to get the particle sizes. You want to look at HDL, triglycerides, inflammatory markers. I know this is a lot, so you want to work with a practitioner who understands it. But then you look at the full picture, and then you could assess if you're at risk of heart disease or not. That fasting insulin I mentioned is a great marker for whether or not you're at risk of heart disease. I know it's not a direct marker for heart disease, but to me, it's a really strong indirect marker. Dr. Philip Ovadia, who's a heart surgeon. This guy's a world-renowned heart surgeon. By the way, he eats a carnivore diet. Whoa, that's crazy. But I know, right? He made the case, and he's right, that there's only one cause of heart disease. That's it. And that causes damage to the blood vessels. Now, what causes that is multifactorial, but there's only one reason somebody dies from heart disease: damage to the blood vessels. And he believes the number one thing that damages the blood vessels is high levels of insulin. High levels of insulin lead to high blood pressure. glucose levels, damages the blood vessels. So that's why I mentioned insulin is the name of the game. It's the first domino. Don't be afraid of fat. Lipophobia is a real thing, but I'm here to make sure you love your fat. You eat the fat. Fat's not going to make you fat. Fat doesn't raise insulin. It lowers inflammation if it's the right fat. So fat is your friend, my
Dude,
friend.
okay, so you kind of blew my mind a little bit with a couple of things there. The one, when people hear like, I feel like I've stated that like an older statistic that like 50% of people who die of heart attacks have regular cholesterol, like
Yeah.
within normal limits,
Yeah.
right?
It's actually 75%. Yeah. You're spot on.
So think about that. Like, and then when I say it to people, they glance over it like, oh well, okay. But I don't want to have a heart attack. And you're like, okay, well, hang on, let's think about this. If I'm supposed to be put on a statin, which lowers my cholesterol, I need all that cholesterol to create my hormones. And my brain is like, what, 60% fat, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and we're struggling with dementia and Alzheimer's, like people's brains basically atrophying and disappearing. And we have way less testosterone amongst the male population than we have in 50 years. Are we seeing any connections here? You know what I mean?
The writing is on the wall, my friend.
I know it's crazy that this is the case, and you still have so many people, and this is where we'll get into a little bit more of you know people in their camps. Um, we still have people of note still defending the you know the lipid model as it was still to this day, and I don't understand like why. Do you have any idea why certain people are just sticking in that camp? I have a more specific question to ask too around
Yeah, I do know why. $13.4 billion were made last year from the statin industry.
Follow the money, my guy.
Dude, follow the money. Look, I get why people are afraid of cholesterol and fat. I get it because when they talk to their conventional allopathic doctor, that's the advice they get. And there's that white coat syndrome, right? There's a power in that doctor's authority. And it's not that that doctor wants harm to you. I think all doctors are trying to do the best they can.
Sure.
But the system, their training is based off of corrupt data that's funded by big pharma, the statin industry. And I mean, how this is awful, and it shouldn't be the case, but certain doctors get a certain bonus in terms of finance, a cash bonus or a financial bonus if they prescribe a certain amount of statins each month. It's like that should be illegal. And if you look at all the 195 countries in the world, only two countries allow big pharma to market on television. That's it. New Zealand and the United States. Out of the 195 countries, and I even did some more data on this because I don't watch TV, but my mom does, and I have dinner with her every Thursday, and her TV's on, and I see all these commercials for statins and Lipitor and low testosterone and Viagra. If you have an erection for more than 4 hours, go see a doctor, sort of thing. And
I'm
I
calling
did
my
some
friends if that happens. I'm sorry. Just kidding.
and it turns out that 75% of all of the TV commercials in the United States are funded by big pharma, dude. 75%, right? And about 15% is funded by big food, fast food restaurants. So it's pretty much every commercial is fast food, statin, big pharma. So that's the answer. It's the money that they're making right now, unfortunately.
Dude, that's staggering. That's staggering if you think about it. Like, not only are we one of the most prosperous countries in the world, but we're one of the fattest and sickest too, and we're
Yeah.
allowing basically drug cartels in a sense to, I mean, in a sense, right? I'm not trying to overhype it like they're out killing people. They're not putting people in the sheetrock. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think they are anyway.
Yeah, hopefully not.
Hopefully not. But we're allowing them to market to us wholesale, right? And next to that, going hand in glove, is the food companies who are creating basically an endless supply of a combination of three things: sugars, seed oils, and you know, uh, like grains, right, of some type. And we're driving this metabolic issue. Like one's driving the metabolic issue, the other is supposed to be helping the metabolic issue, but it seems like a profit scheme, don't you think?
It's a brilliant business model. It really is. It's evil. Don't get me wrong. It's not my style, but brilliant, brilliant business model. You think about it. Somebody, the average American, they walk into their convenience store, 7-Eleven, Walgreens, CVS, whatever it is, and there's a whole bunch of convenient food at the front. They're not even food. It's like food like substances, Frankenfood. And they're cheap and they're available, so they eat it. They get the chips, they get the candy bars, they get the pre-made sandwiches. And it's cheap and they eat it, and then they go home and they eat it, and then they get symptoms from eating that toxic food. So they make an appointment with their doctor through insurance, and then the doctor says, "Oh, you're dealing with that, high blood pressure, whatever it is. Here's a prescription." So they go back to that same convenience store, but now they walk to the back of the store where the pharmacy is to pick up the prescription, and they leave, but they don't change their ways. So they end up coming back to the store and then eating the Frankenfood again, going back home, getting more symptoms, getting another prescription, going to now back to the store, to the back of the store to get another prescription. I mean, like you said, it's hooking them. Front of the store, back of the store, front of the store, back of the store, second symptom, third medication, etc. Brilliant business model. And it's there, it's a form of murder. I know that sounds bold, but it just happens so slowly that it's not being classified as a murder because it's just keeping people sick for a very long time. But the truth is, we're not overweight and obese and have cancer and heart disease because of a medication deficiency. We are doing this to ourselves, and the body, God built the body to be self-healing, and symptoms are not the problem. Symptoms are a gift from the innate intelligence. It's your body's check engine light, your body's way of communicating with you that you're eating something wrong, thinking something wrong, something in your environment. Once you figure out what that is and remove the interference, then the inner physician goes to work for you. So it's not that we lack medication is why we're sick, and health is not the absence of disease. We are designed to thrive and to have amazing energy. That's the way God built us. So you just have to figure out where that interference is coming from.
Dude, that's yeah. It gets a little conspiratorial, right? Which I'm okay with that too, right? Because I mean, at the end of the day, follow the money. So that rarely takes you into the wrong place, right? So but I do want to talk. I know we got a few more minutes. I want to talk about something really specific. I know you did the carnivore diet. I am not a carnivore like practitioner, right? I'm much more in your line of thinking where it's like all of these things are a tool and you use a tool for what it's made for. If all you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail, right? So it's more like, hey, let's use a specific approach to garner a specific response. So you tried it. I would like to hear your thoughts around it. And then I also want to talk briefly, if we have time, about why it's getting so much hate and backlash from prominent names in the allopathic, traditional way of thinking about medicine, right? It just seems like people are just like, this is going to kill you, blah, 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 blah. So I'd like to kind of hear your thoughts around your experience, and then maybe we can get into that real quick.
Yeah, I think carnivore is a fantastic tool. I've been experimenting with carnivore since 2019, where I would do 30 days of carnivore a couple times per year as a reset. I'll explain the benefits of it, but this past time, as you mentioned, I did 90 days, longest I ever did, and I did a whole bunch of labs, day 1, day 90, stool test, day 1, day 90. I put on a continuous glucose monitor as well to prove to people that, to your point, to the allopathic crowd, that it's not what you think. All of my markers improved. I'm going to have a whole video and podcast sharing it all. But the benefits of a carnivore diet, first of all, I'm not a fan of long-term carnivore. I'm not a fan of long-term keto. Yeah. I'm a fan of short-term carnivore. And here's the reason why, because of what it does to reset your gut microbiome. I think a lot of health experts would agree that the gut is very, very important. Hippocrates said a very long time ago, all disease begins in the gut. And now Harvard put out an article a couple years ago showing that all disease begins in the leaky gut. That was actually the title of their article.
Wow.
So the gut is very important. And a lot of people have a compromised digestive system, and there's many reasons why: sugar, seed oils, environmental toxins, stress. But they're digestive system is compromised. So when they eat a lot of vegetables and plants with a compromised digestive system, it actually makes it worse because plants have these chemical defense mechanisms. They're called anti-nutrients. There's over 40. A few of the more popular ones are called oxalates or lectins or tannins.
Mm-hmm.
These are anti-nutrients that the plants have developed as a defense mechanism. And when we eat them with a compromised gut, it creates leaky gut where it can poke holes in our intestinal lining where then undigested food particles go into our bloodstream and then it elicits an immune response leading to autoimmune.
Yep.
It inflames us, leading to joint pain, weight gain, weight loss resistance. So with carnivore, you remove all of that. It's pretty much an elimination diet. It's a very strong anti-inflammatory diet where you're just eating meat and there's no anti-nutrients in meat. So it resets your gut. You're having no carbs, so you're lowering glucose and insulin. We already made the case why that's so important. You're in ketosis throughout it as well because there's no carbs. So it's a great reset for the gut. It helps with weight loss. So it helps with brain fog. It helps with autoimmune conditions. I love it. I don't recommend it long term, but I think a good sweet spot is 30 to 90 days. 90 days was what I just did. And the reason why, to answer your second question, Adam, the reason why there's a lot of backlash against it,
Mm-hmm.
This might sound conspiracy, but there's a big vegan push. There's a big vegan propaganda push for, and in 2030, the plan for these organizations is to have the entire population of the world to be in a plant-based, engineered plant-based diet. That is not conspiracy. You could do some digging and find that out. So of course, keto carnivore is the complete opposite. So they go after keto carnivore. They pay people to go after it, unfortunately. So you got to be your own experiment, do your own experiment. That's why I did my own experiment to show people. And again, this is what worked for me. It doesn't mean it's going to be the same for you, but be your own experiment, do your own experiment and do the labs, how you feel. And you can't argue that. Nobody could argue my own experiment and my results. It's like, this is what I did. This is how I felt. These are my metrics. Like you can't argue that. There's nothing you can say to argue that because this is what I did and I have the data to back it up. So I think that's the best thing you can do is to be your own experiment. And there's nothing that anybody could argue with if you do that.
No, I love all of the conspiracy parts because I mean, look, I'm not like the conspiracy theorists are batting 1,000 at about this point. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, they pretty much are the last 4 years.
After the last 4 years, bro, I'm like, just do the opposite of whatever else.
Exactly. That's pretty good advice.
And you're going to be all right, dude. The freaking George Costanza flow, just do the opposite and you'll see success,
That's
but
right.
One of the things that stuck out to me, and this is not, I want to talk about this particular thing. But the point is not to say anything about a particular person, okay? Because we're all gracious here. We're not trying to bash anybody, but I just remember this stuck out to me. Whenever Jordan Peterson, a well-known carnivore, like for a long time now, because he has a very particular situation, interviewed Dr. Peter Attia, who I really enjoy his work a lot. Like I love Dr. Peter's stuff, Dr. Attia's stuff. But whenever it got to the question about the carnivore diet, it was like crickets. Did you see that at all?
No, I know. Now I'm really curious to see that. He just didn't answer the question.
Well, he couldn't. Like it was just, and it struck me. It just struck me because I was like, huh, because he's extremely intelligent. He's extremely he communicates very well. But like when Jordan Peterson started talking about my gingivitis when it went away, which apparently is forever if you have it. He's like, I'm off all of my medications. I'm I've lost weight. I'm gaining muscle in my 60s. All my brain fog is gone. Like he just went through this litany of things that went better. And Peter was just like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Right. Which I was just like, I was really struck by it. So not that he should have an answer, but I think I was more surprised that he didn't engage in maybe even in an inquisitive kind of way. Like,
yeah,
well,
curiosity.
Let's talk about this. So and I'm seeing that kind of resistance from other people who are pretty high level in that
In
space.
the mainstream health.
Yeah. And I'm just like, I don't understand why it's so. It's just, and I know for those guys, I don't know if it's about money for those guys, but it's just, man, it just strikes me that it's,
Yeah.
you
Well,
know,
I remember, and don't get me wrong. I mean, let me preface this and say I also love a lot of Peter Attia's
yeah,
work, and I have a lot of respect for him.
of course.
With that being said, I remember during the beginning stages of COVID, I was following him on Instagram, and there was a lot of fear mongering going on with Peter Attia. I don't forget it to this day. Again, I say this really respectfully, but I remember watching his videos about stay home. This is very dangerous. And then even when the vaccines rolled around, look, I'm not an anti-vax sort of guy. I'm a freedom of choice more of a guy, but he was pushing that vaccine too, and it raised a lot of just question marks and red flags for me. Um, take that for what it is, but I didn't like that. I think it depends on the premise of how you view the human body. My
Mm.
premise of the human body is that God built the body to be self-healing, and we have everything that we need internal to achieve that. But I think if you have a different premise, maybe Peter Attia's premise is different, then you need a vaccine. You need to do different things to protect the body. But I think the body has everything we need.
Mm.
So I love Peter's work. I think he's brilliant. I don't know why he didn't engage or at least be curious with Jordan Peterson about it. There were a couple of things I didn't like during the COVID stages with Peter Attia. And so I don't know why that reason is. The reason is
Mm.
behind that, but he is a mainstream guy, and I do see like Dr. Hyman too. These mainstream guys tend to kind of stay away from these topics, and I don't know what the reason is.
It's just interesting to me. Like I don't throw shade on anybody. I think I'm noticing like currents. Like you can see the current and different the way people work and where people will engage and where they won't engage. Um and I think I'm trying really hard to be as open-minded as I can about like, man, we don't know everything. Like not everything can be proven by a randomized controlled trial.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, so
like
true. Yeah,
and the whole idea that like, oh, well, you're just using anecdotal evidence that this is true, but isn't all of it kind of like, doesn't the anecdote always cause the question and then the question leads to the randomized controlled trial? Isn't
yeah.
that how that works?
And you can make, yeah, you're right, Adam. And you can make a study look any way you want. You can cherry
Oh
pick and
God, yeah.
yeah, I'm tired of like just saying something is only real when you have a randomized control double blind placebo study. It's like, come on, it's
Like I
annoying.
know it's great, like it helps, like it really does help, but man, if like I've got a lady who she's on a carnivore diet, like 20-year diabetic, like A1C of like 11
Mm,
for years, right? Goes carnivore. Her doctor tells her, I can't, her nutritionist tells her, I can't do this. It's unethical, right? Drops her as a patient. And then, and then tells me, hey, I'm off all my medications. Metformin's gone. Everything's gone. I'm feeling great. I'm
amazing.
lifting weights. She's like, look at my muscles, right? Like, I'm like,
That's
okay,
amazing.
well, I mean, it might be anecdotal, but it's pretty darn powerful.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like
obviously it worked.
something worked and it
Yeah.
wasn't the metformin. So, dude, I don't know, man. I think I'm just laughing. I'm trying not to. I think I'm laughing instead of crying right now because sometimes it gets a little crazy. But, dude, where I want to be respectful of your time. You're crushing the game right now. You're you're interviewing so many great people, and you're also interviewing people that I feel like are not as well known, which I really like that too, because you're getting a lot of more voices involved in the conversation, which I really enjoy.
Thank you.
Where can people find you, man? I know you got books, you're a prolific writer, you're doing tons of stuff online. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about what you're doing?
Thank you, Adam. I appreciate you, bro. I love your work as well. My website's best, benazadi.com, benazadi.com has the podcast, the books, courses, anything you need to find. I'd love to connect with your audience. If you just head to my website, you can find everything you need there.
Dude, so easy. Like, thank you, thank you for making it easy. Not giving us 87 links. That's freaking awesome. So the new book, man, is coming out 2025, right? It's going to be about metabolic flexibility.
Yeah, June 2025, all about metabolic health. What are the top contributors to metabolic dysfunction? And then what are the solutions?
Dude, I'll be on the pre-order if you're gonna have a pre-order because
Yeah,
I just
thank
love
you.
it, man. I'm trying to learn and I appreciate all your knowledge and how generous you are with your information. So, dude, thank you for what you're doing, helping people. Thank you for your audacious goal of helping 1 billion people. I just love that. And I think if you aim for the moon and you hit the clouds, you did pretty darn good, man. So
Amen, bro.
keep
Amen,
it up,
Adam.
man. And
Thank you,
we
bro.
appreciate you. And hopefully we can chat again soon, huh?
We will. Thank you so much, bro. I
All right,
enjoyed the
bro.
conversation.
Talk soon. Hey there, guys. I want to take a quick second to highlight a partner that we've been working with lately, Upgraded Formulas. You can see them at upgradedformulas.com. I have personally been taking their upgraded T formula to support natural testosterone production. I've noticed it after a few months. I've noticed I've had a bit more mental clarity. My rest is a little better, and I'm recovering a bit better from my workouts, which was actually surprising. So I'm able to exercise just a bit more. I love to exercise, so that's a bonus for me. Women can also take this because healthy testosterone levels in women help with fat loss, mental clarity, muscle gain, things like that. And also, the estrogen and testosterone go together hand in hand. If you support one, the other does pretty well as well. So definitely check them out. Also, they do something really great. I want to highlight a hair mineral analysis where you send them a little chunk of your hair and they will let you know if you're deficient in anything or if you have too much of something like heavy metals in your system. So what this does is this is a great thing to help give you data on your health so that you can make decisions. None of this is a miracle cure. All of it is just information to help you make better decisions around your health and supplementation. All right, so really check them out. They're doing some really great quality. They're seeing some huge results, and I believe they're going to have some clinical studies coming out pretty soon. So check them out, upgradedformulas.com. Use the code ADAM10 to get a 10% discount today.